Kenyans really care about mental health? Let's talk about it. You see, in Kenya, stigma is still real, Mental illness is still that one thing that is seen as sort of a weakness, or even worse, a madness. You find that someone in the street is suffering. He or she needs some help, But you know what? Nobody is sort of even concerned to take them to the hospital. Yeah. Nobody is even concerned, especially in the urban areas. Yeah. Everyone is there saying this is a mad person. But have they been taken to a hospital, a mental institution? Yeah. To see, if they can recover. I think it's still a challenge. See, this is one thing that people are suffering silently and are often told that, uko na shida gani? Yeah. What problem do you have? Sometimes you're told, you need to pray, bro. There are some things going on in your life that those are spirit. You need to pray. Yeah. Or you are even told you need to toughen up. As a man, you don't need to be suffering in such situation. You need to be as a man. You're not supposed to be in such situations. Yeah. So you're depressed, and then they tell you, you know what, you need to find something to do. That seems like boredom, But in reality, you are suffering. There is you are mentally ill. So instead of them sort of taking you to hospital, they tell you that you need to find something to do, and you find that that is that one thing that becomes your version of therapy. Yeah. Lack of another thing is lack of access to help. Yeah. You find that there are very few affordable, accessible mental health services. I don't know if I'm in Nairobi, by the way. I don't know if in Nairobi you can find an affordable health facility. Yeah, I only know of one, and that is Madari. So you find that not everyone can actually afford these things, And this, I think, this applies to many African countries. You find that therapy is something that's very expensive. To just hire a therapist is what 2,000 to 5,000 Kenya shillings per session. That is not something that many Kenyans can afford. Not everyone can afford that. Government hospitals they rarely do mental health services. Yeah, they rarely have those specialists. And I think it's one thing that probably the government sort of need to consider. Yeah, and it's something that we sort of need to educate, do some civic education on that particular topic, sort of educate the population on the importance of having good mental health. Yeah. So you find that especially the rural areas, you go to the rural areas and you find that there are zero support systems. Yeah. So how can we say that mental health matters when most of us can't even afford to talk to someone? Yeah. We need to sort of, normalize the idea of talking to other people. I think that's something that can also be a fix. You see, communication is key. And this is something that we're not doing enough, especially in urban areas, because in urban areas, everyone is there to mind their business. Nobody's there to talk to you. Nobody cares about your situation. You live next to your neighbor for 10 years and you even don't know his or her name. Nobody cares about you. But you go to the rural areas, I think it's in the rural areas, even though there are no those professional setups for mental health, find that there is that therapy of having that sense of community, and conversing with people. And I think it's one of the things that sort of makes it better. And then let's talk of religion and cultural barriers. You find that in most cases mental health is spiritualized. Yeah, someone is telling you that's a generational curse. instead of listening to what you're supposed to say and sort of empathize with you and sort of understand you and see that you actually need help, you find that someone is telling you that that is generational curse. You need deliverance. You need to go to church. So you find that culture sort of encourages the silence, yeah, shame, and this applies mostly for men, yeah. You find that seeking help is termed as weakness in many communities, yeah. And you see, sometimes for me, sometimes you need a therapist, yeah, not anointing oil or it's not always that it's a curse, yeah. Sometimes it is a reality. And then there is that pressure to survive overrides. So you find that the pressure to survive overrides the pressure of well-being, yeah. So you find that people are sort of struggling to hit, huh? If you're struggling to hit, then how can you think of the idea of having good mental health? How can you think of the idea of going to a therapist? So you find that the idea of going to a therapist is considered a rich man's event, a rich man's habit. You need money to survive. You need money to go to work, to pay for school fees. Those are the basics. And you find that most people, especially um, Africans, you find that we prioritize on the needs more than the health. And that is, I think, what makes a lot of people not care so much about that mental health. Yeah. Talk of lack of education on the topic is also one of valid reason. People don't even know if they're suffering from mental health. Yeah. How can they know? They can't know because then they don't have that education, that awareness that actually there is something called depression, there's something called burnout, there is something called anxiety. Nobody is nobody is aware of those things, and you find that someone is suffering silently, not understanding what the reason is. There is no proper mental health education systems. So you find that suicides are always in the rise, especially in the slums, and especially among the youth. Yeah. And you find that those who are committing suicide are considered taboo. Later on, you find that people can say that now that this person committed suicide is because of the curse in their generation, and it is something that I think we need to sort of improve on. It's not all the time, it's not all the time that it's a curse. Actually, we're losing people not because they're weak, but because they were never taught, how to sort of ask for help. Yeah. And then I'd say also that progress can be happening, yes, but it is slow. You find that most creators, NGOs, and platforms that are talking about it I mean, those are the only platforms that are talking about it. And slowly by slowly, even the Gen Zs, and the millennials are more open to therapy nowadays compared to those older generations, yeah. And I think it's a work in progress, yeah. But I think we sort of still have a long way to go, and before that thing is sort of normalized, yeah. What do you think? Do you think mental health is one thing that every person should consider key? And what is one of those incidences of mental health negligence that has caused someone to sort of suffer? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and of course, if you like the video, leave a like, and see you in the next one. Bye.